All right, so we are starting our new standard, and that is graphing inequalities. Go ahead and title your notes at the top, Graphing Inequalities. All right, the next thing that you need to write down is when we use a dashed line or a solid line. Before, when we were graphing inequalities on a number line, that was like using an open or closed circle. And so when we're using a coordinate plane, we are going to use a dashed line or solid line. So this first one says dashed line. You use that when you have a less than or greater than symbol. And then you are going to use a solid line to connect your points when you have a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to symbol. And a good tip to remember that is that the less than or equal to and greater than or equal to symbols have a solid line underneath of them that stands for the equal to. All right, the second thing with graphing inequalities is shading. So this is also new to us. So if you have the symbol less than or less than and equal to, you'll shade below the line. Less than means, that it's going to be below our line. So then if you have the greater than or greater than or equal to symbol, you will shade above the line. And when you're shading for graphing inequalities, the shaded area, that is called your solution. And we'll talk more about that as we practice this skill in class together. So here are the steps to graph the inequality. Number 1, identify the y-intercept, the b, and plot it on the graph. Step 2, identify the slope and plot points on the graph, counting rise over run. Step 3, connect the points using a dashed or solid line. Remember to look at the inequality symbol. And then step 4 is to shade above or below the line. And then you need to look at the inequality symbol to determine this. So go ahead and pause your video so you can write down these 4 steps. Okay, so here is example 1. The first example says y is less than 1 over 2x plus 2. So I'm going to follow my steps here on the right. The first thing I'm going to do is identify the y-intercept, the b. So I know that the y-intercept is right here at the end. So I'm going to make my first point on my graph at 2. And then I'm going to use my slope, which is always the number in front of x. And it's already a fraction for us, so I'm going to rise 1. So I'm going to go up 1, and then I'm going to go to the right 2. So from my y-intercept, up 1, and right 1, 2 spaces, and make a point. I'm going to continue this pattern, up 1, and then over 1, 2 until I run out of space on my graph. Up 1 and to the right 1, 2. Okay. I'm also going to go back to my y-intercept and see if I can make points going the other direction to complete my line. So down 1 and to the left 1, 2. This is just going in the opposite direction. So down 1 and left 1, 2. And down 1 and to the left 1, 2. Okay, so I have completed steps 1 and 2 over here. The third step is to connect the points using a dashed or solid line. So I'm going to look back at my notes. And so if it's a less than or greater than symbol, it says to use a dashed line. And we had a less than symbol. So I'm going to connect my points with a dashed line, straight dashed line. And I'm going to make sure that I have arrows at either end. There we go. Okay. Connected them with a dashed line. And I have arrows at either end of my line. The last step is to shade above or below the line. And I'm going to do this by looking back again at my notes, making note that this is my less than symbol. So looking back at my notes, if I have a less than or equal to symbol, it says to shade below the line. So here's my line right here, and I'm going to shade below it. So all of this space below the line without going over the line. Ooh, it's kind of hard on my computer. But hopefully you guys will be able to control yours a lot better on using your pencil. So I'm going to shade below my line. Do not go past the line because our solution is just everything below this line. Okay. So let's go on to example 2. Y is greater than or equal to negative 3x plus 4. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plot a point on my graph at my y-intercept, and I'm always looking at the number at the end of my inequality for that. So I'm going to make my first point at positive 4. And then my slope is negative 3. And so we talked about in our last unit that if we have a whole number, we just put it over 1 to make it a fraction, okay? Because that doesn't change our slope. Because if you do negative 3 divided by 1, you still get negative 3. So, having a negative number, that means I'm going to go down 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'm always going to go to the right. So, over 1. Down 1, 2, 3. And over 1. Down 1, 2, 3, and to the right 1. I'm going to go back to my y-intercept and just double check that I don't have room to go up on my graph. So 1, 2, oh, nope, I don't have any room to go up on my graph. So now I'm ready to go ahead and connect my points. So again, I'm looking at the inequality symbol, and it is a greater than or equal to symbol. So that means that I can connect my points with a solid line. And what tells me that is that it's or equal to. Anytime it's or equal to, that means that we can connect with a solid line. Okay. And then the next thing I need to do is complete the shading. So when it's a greater than or equal to symbol, I need to shade above my line. And so when you have a pretty steep slope, like we do, a trick for figuring out which part is above our line is to go back to our y-intercept, put your pencil on it, and you just move up. And that shows you the side that's going to be your greater than. So we're going to shade this side. This is our above our line. Remember, we are not shading past our line. We are just shading up to it because everything above the line is part of the solution. Oops, I'm like going way out. Again, it's more difficult on my computer, but hopefully it's easier for you guys using your pencil. All right, cleaned it up a little bit. Okay, and then to our next example. This is, I believe, our last example before you try one on your own. So, this example says y is y is greater than negative 4. So, I have to figure out, what does this negative 4 represent? Is it representing my y-intercept, or is it representing my slope? And so if I think back to y equals mx plus b, so a lot of times it's helpful for students to just write down that slope-intercept form just to kind of help them, compare, contrast, and see what this number is actually representing. So looking back at slope-intercept form and remembering that whenever you have this slope, right, the slope is always next to the x. This number does not have an x next to it, so it must be representing my y-intercept. Okay, we're going to set this to the side, maybe, if it lets me. And then we're going to go ahead and plot a point at -4 on our y-intercept. Oh no, it's not letting me switch. My computer's kind of frozen. Alright, it's working again. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and make a point at -4 on our y-intercept. So I'm going down to -4, and I'm making a point right there. Alright, so my point is at -4, and then I'm going to look at my symbol. Oh, this isn't the right. It looks like my stuff got shifted from my computer, so my point will be now at -4. Whew. And then since my slope is not represented by a number here, that means that our slope is actually 0. When they give you just the y-intercept, your slope is 0. So that means that we're going to have a horizontal line. And we have to look at our inequality symbol to determine if it's going to be dashed or solid. And since this is a greater than symbol, that means that we're going to have a dashed line straight across our graph. And then the last thing is the shading. So seeing that we have a greater than symbol, that means that we're going to shade above our line. So that's going to be this whole space up here, because that is the part that's our solution. So any point that is greater than -4 is your solution. So be really careful. I know it's harder on my computer than with your pencil, but do not go past the line. So I cleaned that up. I'm not past my line at all. All right, and so the last problem on here, this is your you-try problem. Go ahead and pause the video here and try this on your own. Okay, so I'm going to go over the you-try problem with you. The first thing you did was make a point at -5. So we have our first point down here at -5. And then we're going to go ahead and use our slope to make more points. So we're going to count up 3, 1, 2, 3, and then over 5 spaces. And that's going to be our next point. And unfortunately, that's going to be our only other point. So now we're going to go ahead and look to see if we can connect our points to make a line with a solid or dashed. And so since this is a less than or equal to symbol, that means that we're going to have a solid line with arrows at the end connecting our points. Okay? And then the very last thing is looking for your shading. So since this is less than or equal to, that means that we're going to shade below our line. So if you need help figuring that out, again, put your pencil at your y-intercept and then go down. And that is the area that you would shade to represent your solution. All right, guys. Have a good day. See you tomorrow.